Welcome to the 3DownNation podcast. I'm Justin Dunk, joined by John Hodge and JC Abbott. The three amigos are back together, fellas. You're a couple of bigger dudes, let's say. How are you dealing with the heat wave? Everybody wants to talk about the heat.
I'm dealing with it by wearing a fancy shirt. And if you're not watching the YouTube version, you're missing it. Guys, it was 48 degrees with the humidex in Winnipeg on Sunday. I was not outside for very long. I went to the Sea Bears game in the afternoon. That was a lot of fun. They unfortunately played terribly, but it was still fun to go. And on the way back, I was outside for maybe 30 seconds. And it was like wearing a blanket on the beach is the only way I could describe it. The air was saturated. It's very humid, and 48, like air temp, I think was 38. I've never felt heat like that. Mexico, Florida, I've been to some hot places. I've never felt anything like that. And fortunately, I've got air conditioning. My heart goes out to people who do not, because there's a lot of folks on the prairies suffering from that heat right now.
It's fortunately not nearly as hot out here in BC. It's still pretty hot. It's high 20s, low 30s. I've got the dehumidifiers going inside to make sure I'm not sweaty like Hodges right now. But I certainly can't even imagine what people in Regina and Winnipeg and across the prairies are going through right now. Watching that broadcast and it being over 50 degrees at field level at Mosaic Stadium, that is ridiculous. I've played in a lot of different conditions back in my ill-fated high school playing days, but the worst game I ever played in was down in San Diego against El Capitan High School in an exhibition game preseason, and it was 44 degrees on a turf field and baking. It was so hot. They had one of those water systems that it comes through. It's like a little teepee type thing, and you spray it in your mouth. The running water was coming out hot out of the pipes because it was baking so bad. Half our team had heat stroke. That to me is hell. The worst possible conditions you could play in. I would not ever dream of trying to do something like that ever again.
I had to ask the big fellas because the heat just doesn't really bother the skinny dudes. Let's put it that way.
How would you do in 48? I feel like you'd be too hot in 48. Come on.
I think I'd be okay.
Oh, to be skinny.
Well, if you stay in the heat long enough, Hodge, you will be. It's like a sauna, but outside.
True.
That's probably true. I'm 10 weeks of this weather away from my goal weight.
Yeah, you could become a jockey.
No, I'm too tall to be a jockey.
He's too tall. But if you guys had to choose, would you rather play in the sweltering heat or snow and cold?
Snow and cold all day.
Snow and cold. I've only ever played in one snow game, to be fair, but I've played in a lot of rain games, and both are much preferable, in my opinion, to the sweltering heat.
Man, our summers are so short, though. I'd rather have the warm weather. That's just me. But let's get rolling, boys. Today, we're discussing Dru Brown making his first start back with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
Damonte Coxie's head-slapping ejection.
Alex Hale's struggles with the Saskatchewan Roughriders.
Tyson Philpot's red-hot start, dare I say, as hot as the weather in some parts of the country.
The BC Lions hiring a new special teams coordinator.
And Charleston Hughes being selected for the Canadian Football Hall of Fame. But first,
the Ottawa Redblacks and Hamilton Tiger-Cats are officially in the CFL's basement. The Redblacks dropped a fifth straight game in Week 6 as Jake Maier threw 4 interceptions and the team's run defense broke down the stretch against Edmonton. Meanwhile, the Tiger-Cats looked lost after losing Bo Levi Mitchell and, as Jake Dolegala, threw for 122 yards and an interception in a 38-7 loss to the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Do the Redblacks or Ticats have any reason for hope? And if so, which team is it?
It's hard for me to see any reasons for hope for either of these franchises right now. And that's with all due respect to other elements of their roster, which are very good. The Hamilton Tiger-Cats have an excellent defense right now. And I thought they played a really solid football game against the Saskatchewan Roughriders. There's a lot of talent in Ottawa outside the quarterback position, but right now, neither of these two teams have the guys that they need to have sustained success. Now, if I was to choose which quarterback is more effective between Jake Maier and Jake Dolegala, I would go with Maier. He's been a proven starter in this league. I think he puts up decent numbers, but he just doesn't have enough to get you over the top. I think they will eventually win a couple of games, whether it's with him at the helm or McLeod Bethel Thompson, but they don't have the gun needed to compete in the East Division. And Hamilton, they just don't have anybody right now. If you don't trust Trey Ford to be magic and create a couple victories out of nothing, I don't know how to help you, because Jake Dolegala right now could not hit the broadside of a barn. He has a absolute cannon for an arm, but it might go into the stands for all he knows. Like, that was a terrible quarterbacking performance. And when you take into account the fact that he threw for 122 yards and his one interception went 107 yards the other way, that's net 15 yards passing, gentlemen. You're not going to win any football games in the CFL with a performance like that. They're in real trouble unless Scott Milanovich embraces the chaos that is Trey Ford.
The answer to the question in 2026 is undoubtedly the Redblacks have more hope, because we saw what the Ticats look like, albeit for one game, with Jake Dolegala as the starter. I think there are other reasons, JC, to push back on you a little bit as to why Dolegala started. He's been in Scott Milanovich's offense longer. I don't think they wanted to hang Trey Ford out there to dry. That said, it was Ford who went into the game after Bo Levi Mitchell went down against Winnipeg. So it's hard for me to make that make sense. Jake Dolegala, to me, is not the exact same type of quarterback that I'm about to name here, but it's similar from an arm strength perspective. Michael Bishop was ultra athletic. You know, the tales that they tell about this guy, he could throw 80 yards on his knees, but struggled with accuracy. I think it's not a perfect comparison because Bishop is a much better athlete, but it's similar in this regard. And I think if you're Jake Dolegala, you have to understand that essentially your career is on the line here. He's now 2-10 as a starting quarterback in the Canadian Football League. That is, by all accounts, way worse than even subpar. So I do understand it from a Ticats perspective that perhaps you don't want to run Trey Ford out there if you don't feel like he has a full grasp of the offense, or if you think, okay, maybe there's a way we can win the football game in Saskatchewan or at least keep it close while giving Ford more time to be comfortable within Scott Milanovich's scheme. But then, for as smart as Scott Milanovich is as an offensive guru, how do you not run the ball more? I think Larry Roundtree III had 3 carries in the first half. And then after halftime, came out and quickly had another 4, and then finished with what he had. So if you actually look and break this game down, there were opportunities for the Ticats to be in it and potentially take the lead. And I thought that's because the Riders lacked a lot of energy, especially to start the football game. And I think, to be fair, Dolegala probably could hit the broadside of a barn, but there were some notable passes that were off target by just enough for them to become incompletions, whether it's Tavon Campbell knocking down that go or fade ball throw down the right rail to Kenny Lawler in the end zone. Things like that. But it is also hard as a quarterback, Dolegala in this instance, to go from getting some reps in training camp to essentially none when Bo Levi Mitchell's the starter. Same could be said for Trey Ford. And then being thrown in there and having to get used to playing with Kenny Lawler, Keandre Smith, and the rest of that great receiving corps at game speed. JC, you know that well from your days playing. Hodge, you too, even though it wasn't necessarily as long as we played. Game speed is different, right? There are guys that don't practice very well, but that are gamers. So I think that if you're Dolegala and we're looking at his analysis here, you have to understand that part of it. Did he play well? Absolutely not. But there were opportunities there for the Tiger-Cats to be in that football game. That said, I think the answer for 2026 is the Redblacks. Jake Maier has shown some signs here and there, but like Greg Bell has to be better. I think the offensive line needs to play better, and we've raved about the receiving group in Ottawa, but they need to be better as well. And I think if Keelan White can get back into the lineup, that would really help that team there. But then also the defense has to play better too. I think as a whole, if you're looking at both these teams, unless Trey Ford can pull some magic out, Ottawa should finish ahead of Hamilton. Now, that's not saying much, but I think Scott Milanovic here has some time to try to get a quarterback in the mix, because if you're Hamilton or Ottawa at the moment, you're looking at this as essentially a race with Toronto to get to that 2 spot in the East. It seems like Montreal could just walk to that number 1 seed in the East final. It's never as easy as it seems, though, but that's how it feels after week 6. So then you're Hamilton and Ottawa looking at Toronto. But Chad Kelly is a much better quarterback, obviously, than Jake Maier, Jake Dolegala, or Trey Ford. But that's what you're looking at now. How many wins is it going to take to get that number 2 spot in the East?
Yeah, I'm being asked to pick between a rock and a hard place here. I would love to sit here and give Redblacks fans a bunch of hope, because I think Redblacks fans deserve so much better than how that team has played dating back all the way to 2019 across multiple regimes, multiple franchise quarterbacks, all that. But I'm sorry, if you're a Redblacks fan, how was week 6 not like the worst thing ever? You watch your team, you know, like kind of compete with Edmonton in the first half and then roll over like dogs in the second half. And then you watch on Friday night. Well, fair. But then you watch on Friday night as Dru Brown, like, didn't totally light it up for the Bombers, but he played well. 25 of 31, over 300 yards, a touchdown, 1 pick. I didn't think Dru Brown's arm strength looked like a problem. To me, on Friday night, watching him live, I thought his arm strength looked pretty good. So you look at the teams, for example, the Redblacks have already played. They're 0-5. Well, they're done playing Edmonton. That's good news, because Edmonton's a good football team, and evidently Justin Rankin completely has Ottawa's number. They've also lost to Toronto, Montreal, and Sask. 3 of those losses have come at home for Ottawa, 2 on the road. And you go, okay, those are all, good teams. Maybe there's some easier matchups coming up, and you kind of start going through the schedule, and kind of an odd scheduling quirk. The 2 teams we're talking about, Hamilton and Ottawa, don't play each other head-to-head until week 18. They play week 18 and week 21, which, by the way, let's hope one of these teams bounces back. Otherwise, their week 21 matchup on October 24th might be the worst game in Canadian Football League history. But let's worry about that when we get there and the leaves start falling. Before that, I'm going through the Redblacks schedule, and it's hard to pick out wins. Like, they've got Winnipeg 2 of their next 4. They'd love to, I think, come away with a split there. They've got Montreal in 2 of their next 5. I think they'd be happy with a split there. They also play at Saskatchewan in week 10. I don't see a win there, but maybe they steal a game. If all that comes to fruition after starting 0-5, you're now talking about a team that's 3-7. In which case, I'm still not convinced you've caught Hamilton, because they have a 4-point lead on you right now with 2 wins already in the bank, beating Winnipeg in week 2, BC in week 3. Then again, the schedule looks pretty miserable for the Tabbies. They've got Toronto this week, a team that I think is better than their record shows and is going to be completely PO'd coming off that loss in Winnipeg. They then have to go to Montreal. I don't care who starts a quarterback for the Tiger-Cats. I don't think they're winning in Montreal. And they've got Calgary, a team that I think, again, is way better than their record says. BC, another team that, if they've figured it out on defense and special teams, is going to be very good. And then they've got Saskatchewan. Like, I have a hard time going through the schedule, trying to map out a path for either of these teams to get to second place in the East. And the reason I say second place is because I'm 100% in agreement with you, Justin. Third place is not going to cut it. There's going to be a crossover this year, and the playoff format is changing. So RIP crossover. This is the last crossover ever. I think it's almost a sure thing that it's going to happen for West Division teams in the playoffs, because I'm sorry, how does the 4th place team in the West not finish higher than Ottawa and Hamilton? So these teams are under a ton of pressure. They always say the CFL is a marathon, not a sprint. I agree with that to some extent, They also say that the CFL season doesn't even start till Labor Day. Well, I'm sorry, that's trash. That hasn't been true in a long time. If it was ever true, it started 5-6 weeks ago, and that's why these teams are in such holes, because Ottawa has yet to win a game, and the Ticats lost their fearless leader, and they don't have a replacement. And I'll say one thing, because Jake Dolegala has taken a ton of criticism on this show already, just in our first 15 minutes, which I think is warranted. But Kenny Lawler and Keandre Smith, who are both excellent players, really good players, were miserable in Saskatchewan. Keandre Smith dropped, I had at least 2, if not 3 passes, and Kenny Lawler the costly fumble. So this is something that Mike O'Shea, and it's top of mind because he's spoken about it recently in Winnipeg, when you don't have your starter, and he talked about this when Taylor Elgersma came into that game, he said the margin of error is less for everybody, right? Everybody else has to step up and help set up the quarterback for success. Well, watching the Ticats, I thought if anything, the opposite happened. It's like these players who were playing brilliantly with Bo, and I appreciate that Jake Dolegala's ball placement. I think that's a good point. You know, not as sharp as Bo's, fair enough, but you've got to bring your A-plus game when you're going against a good team, you're on the road, and you've got a struggling backup under center. Like, you have to bring your A-plus game, and I just didn't see that at all. So hopefully for their sake, again, excellent players, they didn't bring their A game in week 6. For the Ticats' sake, hopefully Kenny Lawler, Keandre Smith, their 2 best receivers, bring it in week 7, because they have to be better and help whoever's under center, whether it's Jake, whether it's Trey Ford, Jarrett Daggy, or even Harrison Frost.
I think there is one more element to this question that we haven't really touched on, and that's the long-term hope, right? Even if the Hamilton Tiger-Cats can't get this figured out without Bo Levi Mitchell, I think that fan base will be pretty okay in the long term with whatever happens, right? As much as we talk about that long Grey Cup drought and some of the struggles they've had at times, they'll understand that they got dealt a bad hand here. Like, their franchise MOP level quarterback suffered a potentially season-ending injury, and it's tough to come back from that in any circumstance, right? Sometimes it just doesn't fall your way. When it comes to the Ottawa Redblacks, I don't think there is going to be that perception or that patience. And the last couple years, I've had the opportunity on occasion to listen to a couple of Redblacks postgame shows. And last year, when I listened in after some of their worst losses, there was legitimate fury from the callers who were on the line, you know, people who were enraged and threatening to cancel their season tickets and done with this team. When I listened this week, it was more apathetic. There were fewer callers overall, I think. There were some who just had to laugh because of how inept it was. And there was one individual, and I'm blanking on his name right now, who very eloquently described the team's struggles. And then he talked about his fandom dating back to the time he was a little kid in Ottawa with the Rough Riders. And by the end of his description of the struggles that this team has gone to, he was near tears, to the point where the post-game hosts had to step in and said, you know, don't let this team affect your health overall or your happiness in life. Like, it's gotten to that point in Ottawa, and you can see it with the empty seats in the stands. Like, it is not acceptable what they've been able to put on the field the last few years. And it's mistake after mistake after mistake from a management perspective. Whether that's real or imagined, it has the same effect, right? And when you've got a guy like Dru Brown, who you trade away from a winless team and then goes and wins a football game with a pretty effective quarterbacking performance for somebody else, like, that only makes these situations worse. And my heart goes out to the fans that are out there in Ottawa that are still hanging on. But I think they're going to reach a crisis point here if this Ottawa team can't figure it out on the field in the near future, because you're seeing the effects and the loss of interest.
It is sad in Ottawa, fellas, really sad. And you look at that football team, and I present to you the article that I wrote about letting Trevor Harris go after the 2018 season. Like, can you imagine making that decision to sign Dominique Davis and being okay letting Trevor Harris or whoever the quarterback may be that threw for over 5,000 yards and led you to a Grey Cup? You just let them walk out the door over a signing bonus. It's unbelievable. Now, Sean Burke was not there for that specific decision, so that's not on him. That was on then general manager Marcel Desjardins. But the franchise has not been able to recover since. And in a way, it's unbelievable. But they have a CFL high 13 starting quarterbacks since and have just not found an answer. Now, JC, I like the word you used there, imagined, because there has been so much critical analysis directed at the Dru Brown trade and the fact that he went from Ottawa, where he was the number 2, and then won a game with Winnipeg. But the fact is, Dru Brown did not want to be in the nation's capital anymore. I think that's really gone under the radar. He asked for his release. He wanted to be traded back to Winnipeg. It's really the only place that he wanted to go. So I think that point needs to be out there, but it's hard for the fans to understand that or swallow it when you do watch Dru Brown go out and win a game with essentially just one real day of practice and teaming back up with his offensive coordinator, Tommy Condell, who was with him for 2 years in the nation's capital. So for as bad as the Redblacks have been, I think we should mention that in 2024, they were able to make the playoffs 9-8-1 with Dru Brown. It hasn't been all bad. But outside of that year, Ottawa has either had on their own or been tied for the worst record in the Canadian Football League. And JC, you alluded to it. The fans, or lack thereof, in the stands have shown where this team is at. So I think the rest of the 2026 season is much more important for Ottawa. You know, not even just from I was going to say competition standpoint. That's not the right word, but from a franchise viability standpoint, needs to win some football games to get the fan base, the hardcores who have stuck through thick and thin, and a lot of thin over recent years since 2018, to come back and have even an ounce of belief in the football team. That is not perceived. That is real, regardless of what the people in the front office there want to think. Take a look around the stadium, listen to the post-game show, because you have to do better. You have to stare these decisions that were made. JC, you talked about it, mistake after mistake after mistake in the face, and learn from them. Otherwise, you're going to be out of a job, right? The fans essentially pay the salaries of the people in the front office and the players, and even in a roundabout way, the people in the media. So just as 3DownNation is accountable to the fans, the people in the nation's capital running that football team from all different facets are accountable to the fans in the nation's capital. They're lucky that some of these long, hardcore fans, like the guy crying on the phone, have stuck with them through this terrible stretch that they've been on outside of 2024. So I think the rest of the 2026 season, JC, you said it well, Ticats fans are going to understand that, right? You can't replace an MLP quarterback. You should know that in the CFL season, you're going to need 2, and there was a lot of excitement about Trey Ford going there. So let's see what he can do if he earns the opportunity to start some football games there. I think earns is a key word. But Ottawa really has to find a way to win some games. And I hope, honestly, for the betterment of the league, that it can happen, because having a team that's that bad for that long isn't good for business.
The best story of the CFL season so far, the Edmonton Elks resurgence. It hasn't resulted in butts and seats yet, but I think there's optimism that it will. The worst CFL storyline so far, that's probably Bo Levi Mitchell's injury. But again, the Tabbies can bounce back from that, right? Bo Levi Mitchell can bounce back from that. The worst storyline is the Ottawa Redblacks continuing to live in the cellar, and it sucks. It really sucks.
We should move on, but before we do, I think it's important that we do answer the questions that are on everybody's mind right now for both of these franchises. So I'll put each of your feet to the fire with a succinct answer here. If you were the Hamilton Tiger-Cats, who you start in your next game, Trey Ford or Jake Dolegala? I'll go to you first, Don.
I'd go Jake Dolegala, and if he struggles, Trey Ford is ready to come into the game.
Hodge?
I agree with that. Jake Dolegala, short leash.
I'm going Trey Ford already. I would embrace the chaos entirely. I know I'm going to lose a lot of games with him, but I also think I'm going to win a couple that nobody else can. So that's where I would go. I'll ask the same question for the Ottawa Redblacks because Jake Maier was benched at the end of that blowout, and there's some who have speculated that a change could be coming. Would you go with Jake Maier or McLeod Bethel-Thompson in the next game for the Ottawa Redblacks?
I'd ride Jake Maier until you get to the point where you're essentially mathematically eliminated from the playoffs if that happens in Ottawa. And if you're not playing Jake Maier, there is no reason to play McLeod Bethel-Thompson. Okay? If the season's as far gone as it already is, why would you not play Bryson Barnes and find out what you have in him, or find another young quarterback there to develop?
If I'm the Ottawa Redblacks, I think I roll with Jake Maier for another few games. If come August, it's still not working, I roll with Bryson Barnes. And if Bryson Barnes can't get it done, I am signing and starting Max Duggan.
Yeah, I'm 100% in alignment with you guys. There is no circumstance in my mind in which McLeod Bethel-Thompson is the best option for this team, either in the short term, based on what we saw from him last year, or in the long term. Starting a 38-year-old quarterback who looked washed up in his last season does not help you solve the problems that we just laid out. If you can't go with Jake Maier, find out what you have in Bryson Barnes, bringing guys off your neg list, throw stuff at a wall, hoping you find your next quarterback, because I think
Adams
ultimately
is still out there. He didn't look terrible.
Ultimately, Ottawa's going to have to find a guy, whether it's this year or next year. And you don't know who might be available on the free agent market or up for trade. So you best be proactive and figure out what your best options are.
Dru Brown, the aforementioned quarterback, made his first start since rejoining the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in Week 6 and played well in a 30-21 win over Toronto, completing 25 of 31 passes for 339 yards with 1 touchdown and 1 interception. Do you think, talk about the weather being hot, this is a burning hot question. Brown should remain the team starter even when Zach Collaros becomes healthy?
No, I think this is still Zach's job. But that said, I mean, let's also call a spade a spade. I mean, Zach did not play well in that Hamilton game, albeit in a relatively short sample size. He only played a quarter. I thought Zach, up till that point, had looked good. 5 touchdowns, 2 picks over 3 games. Came into that game 1-2 as a starter. Look, I think Dru Brown is the future of this team. Maybe not like the long-term future. I still think long-term, it's Taylor Elgersma. But on the intermediate term, and by that I would say 2027, I think this is going to be Dru Brown's team. I don't think that's written in stone or decided yet necessarily, but if I had to pick what the most likely result would be, is I think this is probably Zach Collaros' last year. And then Dru Brown will be the franchise guy next season, possibly even with Zach on staff as a coach. I think Zach is going to have some intriguing opportunities in the media when he's done playing, but I also think he's going to have some interesting opportunities coaching-wise. And for Zach, the great news is he's a smart, talented person who will be able to pick what he wants to do, right? A lot of players, when they're done playing, it's a little bit of an identity crisis. Like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? How do I move on? Well, Zach, I'm sure he's still going to have some of those things, some of those feelings. It's only natural when you're done playing. He's played professionally for 1.5 decades at this point. But my point is, I think he's going to have lots of good opportunities to keep making a good living in the game, which we know he's very passionate about and has played at a high level for a long time. But I also think that, and this is probably only possible because Zach and Dru have an excellent relationship, but I think for the rest of the season, you can look at it and say, okay, if Zach is struggling in a particular game, there is no reason to not put in Dru Brown. And I'll go back to 2023 really quickly. There was a game in Edmonton. This was year 2 of the ill-fated Chris Jones Edmonton Elks, where the Bombers lost Zach near, I believe it was the end of the first half, and they were down, I think it was 27-0. And Dru Brown came into the game and threw, I believe it was 4 touchdown passes and won it. So if you have 2 quarterbacks, right, 2 quarterback systems are generally ill-fated, whether it's because of ego or just lack of clarity or players wanting to know who's the guy, right? I think it's best generally to have one franchise guy. But given how high the team is on both these guys, given that they both have a good relationship with offensive coordinator Tommy Condell, and most importantly, they have an excellent relationship between the two of them, I think it would be possible to run somewhat of a quarterback system. And I'll also say, if Zach strings multiple bad starts together, I think you can revisit this question. And every time Zach Collaros' name comes up kind of in this context, I have people say to me, oh, well, but Mike O'Shea is extremely loyal. Mike O'Shea doesn't move on from any of his guys. Mike O'Shea just keeps bringing the same guys back every year. And there is some truth to that. I'm not going to sit here and, as someone who's asked him hundreds of questions over the years, I'm not going to sit here and say he's not stubborn. He is stubborn. But he's also somebody who has, whether it's directly or indirectly, moved on from a ton of guys in the past who have been important players for this team and have been some of his, I think, most beloved players. Some of them are guys, key core special teamers like Jesse Briggs, or guys like Shane Gauthier, or true standout stud players like Dalton Schoen, who wasn't brought back, or Adam Bighill, who was not brought back after 2024. So there have been lots of instances of the team moving on from players. And if it helps this team win, it helps them get back to the Grey Cup after missing out in 2025, I think that they could look to Dru Brown. I think Dru Brown's the near future anyway. And if he continues to play at a high level when given the opportunity to do so, I see no reason to have Dru on the bench if and when Zach falters.
I think you're on the right track here, Hodge. And I'm also not quite ready to say that Zach Collaros should be benched for Dru Brown, but I can't say the thought hasn't crossed my mind, right? Dru Brown looked very good in that start, and I've been critical of Zach for the last couple of years. I think you're in a situation where you have an abundance of riches, and you can have Zach on a relatively short leash. If he is struggling in a particular week, if he is a little banged up, as he has been multiple times over the last couple of years, you don't have to risk it. You can simply go with Dru and play it that way. And we spoke about Trevor Harris in Ottawa just in the last segment, and I go back to his first season there when they won the Grey Cup with Henry Burris in his final season, and how they had 2 starting caliber quarterbacks, and it helped lead them to a Grey Cup. One in his final year who dealt with some injuries, one who was up and coming. And while I don't think it's a perfect comparison, I do see some of those same trappings in this circumstance. And I think Dru could give you an advantage in some of those games where Zach just doesn't have the arm for it anymore, or he's not feeling it because of his neck. I think that the Bombers have done really well to position themselves by acquiring Dru Brown, and I believe ultimately he will win more games than just this one by the time the season is done.
I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here. It's one start for Dru Brown against an Argos defense that seems to have been figured out. Vernon Adams Jr., 6 passing touchdowns and just absolutely going off. And then, Dru Brown doing his thing. And it's not like the defense was really holding anybody too tightly before that either. Like, just look at Trevor Harris's numbers against them, or Davis Alexander's statistics as well. So I would want to see this in a more prolonged fashion from Dru Brown if we're going to have this conversation legitimately. But hey, we're here right now. So I do think it is early, but if Zach is going to be out any longer than the one game that he's already missed, it looks like Brown is at least comfortable in the offensive scheme with Tommy Condell. Somehow that quickly changed after one practice. I still don't understand why Dru Brown wasn't even dressed in Hamilton, but the Bombers got the win. So I guess that's a moot point. But I will credit Derek Taylor, the Bombers play-by-play man, for asking O'Shea that very question after the game in Hamilton. It did not seem like O'Shea liked it. But when you are, again with O'Shea, the head man, and you make these decisions, there might be people in the media or your fans who essentially pay your salary that have questions about it. So I just don't get the frustration. Why can't you sit there and answer the question? Give some insight. Then the fans might be able to understand how Dru Brown went from standing in street clothes on the sideline, and some people felt like forcing Taylor Elgersma into action perhaps before he was ready, although I think he looked okay, and Tommy Condell called plays that weren't putting him in a position to be exposed, to then the next week you have legitimately one practice, and then Dru Brown's all of a sudden the starter. Like, to me, that doesn't make sense. It worked out for Hamilton. They won both games, but when your fans have questions through the media, answer them. It's not really that hard. We're not questioning your decision-making. We're just trying to understand the thought process. So full credit to DT for asking that question on the post-game show after the win in Hamilton. I think Winnipeg at least is in a great spot with their quarterbacks. Go, Hodge.
I was just going to say, you do make an excellent point about the Argos. The Argonauts rank 9th in my favorite statistic, which is opponent yards per play. For defenses, they're at 7.7. That is 0.2 of a yard worse than everybody else. Strangely, Calgary is 8th, a unit that has had some injuries in the secondary, but that defensive line is back to full health. That's kind of a surprising number. And the BC Lions, who everybody was hanging up to absolutely dry after a few weeks with their struggling defense, they're 7th, which is not good, but it's not like they're 9th, and they're not a distant 9th. On the flip side, the top team is Saskatchewan, followed by Edmonton, then Winnipeg, the 3 in the middle, Hamilton, Montreal, Ottawa. And offensively, Ottawa is 0.3 of a yard worse than everybody in last. Number 1 is Montreal at 7.8 yards per play. Toronto came into this week number 1 in that statistic offensively. They were number 1 offensively, number 9 defensively. They're now number 2 offensively, number 9 defensively. And the reason I like the stat, by the way, is because if you just look at net offense allowed, like the Ottawa Redblacks are 9th in yards allowed, but that to me is skewed because they spend a lot of time on the field because their offense doesn't move the ball. So the Redblacks are 6th in yards allowed per play. They're 9th allowed in net. I think net is a little bit misleading for that reason. I prefer per play. The same is true on the flip side. BC is number 1 in net offense, but they're only 3rd in yards per play. And that's because their defense can't necessarily get, or at least the offense, I guess, is maybe spending more time because their defense is allowing touchdowns so fast. I don't know. But regardless, per play, I think is always better than just looking at the gross because we don't know how many plays each team is going to get in any offensive game. It can vary based on a ton of different factors.
You're backing me up. The Argos defense is bad. And yes, there have been points aplenty for the majority of games to start the 2026 season, but the Argos have given up a pile of them. 37, 24, 34, 58, and then 30. So the 24 came against Ottawa. Let's throw that out. So other than playing the Ottawa Redblacks, the Argos' lowest point total given up is 30 against Winnipeg with a quarterback that had 1 day of practice to get back and comfortable in his offensive scheme with Tommy Condell. That is not good. Toronto's defense has to improve. So that's why I say with Dru Brown, I would like to see a little bigger sample size than just going against that horrendous, as you pointed out, yards per play Argonauts defense.
And here's some more context. So times you're on the field, so defensive plays in a game, the Lions have the fewest at 51.5. The Redblacks have the most at 59.2. That means so far through week 6, when the Redblacks have played a game, their defense has been on the field 8 plays more than BC. So the fact that BC is allowed less net yardage is actually not impressive at all because they're only playing, they're playing a significantly fewer percentage of snaps per game, which is why per play, BC's actually a little worse than Ottawa. But if you just look at net, you go, wow, BC is 4th, Ottawa's 9th. That means BC's actually pretty good and Ottawa's terrible. That doesn't make sense to me. So I always go by per play. And yes, Toronto is 9th. Not a distant 9th, but they're 9th. And so it will be interesting to see what happens with Dru Brown if he remains in the game. And by the way, we don't cheer for players or teams at 3DownNation. We do cheer for storylines, however. So please, for the love of God, let's have Dru Brown start in Ottawa this week. Please. It would be the best story of the year. That would be amazing. Please. It doesn't matter if he goes in there and plays terribly, if he plays well, plays mediocre. Doesn't matter. The Dru Brown versus Riot Dinwiddie storyline needs to happen. Pretty please. Let's hope the script writers nailed this one, please.
Hodge, give the script to Colaris, and I hope TSN has a permanent locked off ISO camera on Dru Brown and Ryan Dinwiddie the entire time, because I want to see every interaction, every look, if that goes down. So please make it happen.
Who needs reality TV when you got pro football?
Just keep the ISO shots in the corner of the screen at all times, so we can just see it constantly with every play. Oh boy, that would be awesome.
We can call it the Drunwitty cast. Drunwitty. You got Dru on one, you got Dinwiddie in the other.
The Drunwitty cast.
The Drunwitty cast. Be great.
The best part is they would both hate that name. Their names being joined together. Neither of them.
Yeah, probably. That's fine. Hey, we got to boost the ratings, boys. We got to sell tickets. Come on, it'd be great. Argonauts receiver Damonte Coxie was ejected from Toronto's Week 6 game after he slapped Winnipeg defensive back Major Williams across the face. Williams told 3DownNation postgame that Coxie had slapped him multiple times before the ejection occurred. Argos head coach Mike Miller indicated he did not see the slap, but said, quote, anytime a guy gets ejected, we've got to have discipline in those moments, close quote. JC, what did you make of the situation?
Well, let's call a spade a spade. This was probably the softest ejection I've ever seen in a CFL game. Yes, there was a slap that occurred, but it was sort of the type of loving slap you might give to a friend when you're saying, hey, bud, it's all going to be okay. You tap him on the cheek. It was not a big blow to the head. Now, by the letter of the law, the right call was made. The rulebook does not specify that the slap has to be forceful. It can be an ejection for either a closed fist or an open fist, as long as there is a blow to the head, or in fact, even an attempted blow to the head. If Damonte Coxie had not made contact, he could have still been suspended for any attempt to hit Major Williams in the head. So I don't disagree with the ref's decision, but I do understand some of the people who were criticizing the call after the game because of the degree of contact. Now, what I didn't like about this situation was how Coxie conducted himself after the ejection. I don't like the taunting and bounding out of the stadium. I understand their emotions are high, but when your team is losing a football game and you have just made it harder on them when they are trying to come back, I don't think it reflects well on yourself to conduct yourself in that manner as you are exiting. I think that's something that he is going to regret in hindsight. The other element I didn't love was Mike Miller's answers to the questions, not because he didn't say the right thing necessarily. He admitted that, anytime there's an ejection, we have to have better discipline. But to me, even though you're an offensive coordinator too, and you've got to focus on the next play, you can't be unaware of things happening as a head coach, whether in the moment or being informed of things after the game. The fact that he came into that press conference and didn't quite know why Coxie had been ejected and hadn't seen his antics as he was leaving and no one had informed him about that, that's a little concerning to me. And perhaps that's some of the troubles that are happening in Toronto right now. Mike Miller, of course, is a first-time head coach. We've talked about how their defense is struggling. Their offense has been fantastic. He's taking care of business as a coordinator. I'm not fully convinced in terms of game management and some of those other elements that he has as strong a control as most head coaches do right now, because there have been multiple times where things have happened, this or that in a game, And his answers have seemingly reflected a guy that's focused too specifically on calling the next play rather than engaging with the entire aspect of his football team, which ultimately is your responsibility as well when you're a head coach.
Before I get on my soapbox about Mike Miller here, whose reaction was worse, Damonte Coxie or Habakkuk Baldonado given the double bird while being blown out in Edmonton?
I forgot about the double bird.
Oh boy. And for the record, we have confirmed the double bird. We have photographic evidence of the double bird. I don't know if it was to the fans or whether it was to the coach's box. Like, was he doing that to his own coordinator? I have no idea, but he flipped 2 middle fingers right up into the sky after his sack.
I saw somebody joke that Habakkuk was flipping off his agent for making him sign in Ottawa. And I just want to make it clear that as far as we're aware, Mr. Baldonado represents himself. So if he wants to flip off his agent, he's going to need a mirror to
turn
do
the
it.
birds around.
Turn the birds around. That sounds like an Eagles song. I would listen to that song.
He did get some great money to sign in Ottawa, but
well, he's going to
if
pay
we're
some
talking
of it
about reactions,
he's going to have to say goodbye to some of that money.
Baldonado's was more funny. Coxie's was questionable. As for Mike Miller, you guys have heard me talk about this in the past. These coaches, and in particular head coaches, a lot of them are micromanagers. How do you not know what one of your players did when he left the field after he got ejected? When you get asked a question about it, and again, I just don't understand it. It's the same as like a serious injury happens, right? And some of these coaches, and I get it, they might not have the details, okay? But they'll be like, I don't really know what's going on with him. I don't know how long they'll be out. The second that injury happens, there is athletic trainers there making a decision as to whether the player can come back in the game or not. Then when that decision is made that they are not going to be able to return in the game, how do you not have a realistic idea of how bad the injury is? I get you don't want to tell the media, but I've talked about this before. Like, just don't answer the question then. Same goes for Mike Miller. Don't say that you don't know what happened. And if you don't know what happened, somebody on the Argos staff ain't doing their job, okay? Because conduct with the Argos in 2026, and I'll just speak on 2026 specifically, has been an issue. Mike Miller, Chad Kelly in their first game together as franchise quarterback and head coach getting after it. So yes, these questions are going to happen, especially soft or not, when one of your players gets kicked out of the game and then subsequently an opposing player accuses Coxie, Major Williams in this instance, of it not being the first time that it's happened. So yes, you are going to get questions about it, but don't say that you don't know. How do you not know? Like JC said, it's your job to know. If you know, but you don't want to answer the question, just say that. It's much better and way more transparent for your fans. Soapbox rant over, but I am just sick and tired of it with these coaches. You are essentially talking to your fans, whether you like the media or not. I don't understand how in 2026, the coaches just don't understand it.
This is a tangent, but the same should also go for starting quarterbacks, like perhaps Jake Maier when he's asked how you turn around the winless Ottawa Redblacks. I don't know is never an acceptable answer.
That was
in
honest,
that circumstance.
It was honest.
It was honest. An honest response that after the game, he felt like he was looking for answers. That was at least, I believe, honest. I know what you're saying, JC, but that was, I believe, an honest response.
Honest or not, you can spin your honesty in a better, more confident way than saying, no. I really don't know right
honesty
now.
Is like, what we asked
that
for.
Does not project competence. Let's
it
be frank.
Doesn't project confidence, but it also is honest. I felt like that was a very revealing answer from a professional athlete after a game where his team has dropped to 0-5 and they're searching for answers. because sometimes it can feel like that. I didn't play at the professional level, but in university, drink, I did not say the G word. Sometimes even in the middle of a game, you're trying to figure it out, right? So I actually appreciated the honesty from Jake Mayer.
I will say this. I agree with some of the feedback saying, oh, that was such a soft penalty. Why would you throw it? Well, there's this thing called the rule book, and the rule book states that if you, with a closed or open hand, strike an opponent anywhere on the helmet, you get ejected. So the fact that Damonte Coxie allegedly did this a bunch of times and then finally did it again and was ejected is the fault of Damonte Coxie. Like, the officials have a job to do, and their job is to enforce the rule book. And I think we're generally, just as a society, way too critical of sports officials who generally do a very hard job at a competent level. Generally. Are there missed calls? Yes. Are there moments we all wish they were better? Yes. And that's not a CFL thing. That's not an NFL thing. That's an all sports thing. I get it. But if you're Damonte Coxie in a close game as your team's best receiver, your job is to make catches and get your team back into the lead. And anything that you do that's extracurricular that could put that at risk is foolish. So I do not bemoan the officials for calling this penalty. The rule book states, and by the way, the officials do not write the rule book. It is a committee of coaches, a few members of the union, and the officiating group that cumulatively, and a rep from the league, cumulatively work together to make the rule book. So if all parties have decided on a rule, the officials then should not get in trouble for enforcing that rule. I have the same feeling about headshots on the quarterback. Every year, we see a quarterback, there's like a little bit of contact to the helmet and roughing the passer gets called, and everyone goes, oh, how could they call that? It's like, well, this is a black and white rule. If you hit the head, it's a penalty. And I think that if you want to make the rule more gray, maybe the answer should be like, oh, incidental contact to the helmet is fine. However, beyond like maybe you could build it into the rule, but that's not in the rule. And the official's job is not to change rules on the fly or change the interpretation of rules on the fly. Their job is to know the rule book as well as anybody, be absolute experts on it, and then enforce it. And that's what the official did. And I don't like that we're now seeing negative pushback towards the official. It was the proper call. The official enforced the rule book. That is their job. If you don't want to get ejected from a game, don't slap people. And if you're going to slap someone, maybe make it worth your time. Also that, just actually slap them hard. Why are you doing wussy slaps anyway? Like, again, stupid thing to do, but if you're going to do it, why not just do it? Because by the letter of the law, you should get ejected anyway.
John Hodge is advocating for people to cold cock opponents
No,
right
I'm
now.
not. No, I'm not.
He's just saying, get your money's worth.
If you're gonna be out here slapping people, why are you doing baby slaps?
Oh boy. I think there's one last element here that maybe doesn't play into the slap itself, but may have affected some of the emotion that Damonte Coxie shows as he's leaving the field. Like, this is a frustrated Argos team right now. And Chad Kelly, after the game, really, I thought, opened up with some of his complaints and was very honest about the struggles that they're going through, having to be forced onto the road by the FIFA World Cup and by the ineptitude of their ownership in essentially selling off 3 home games to some of the toughest places to play in the entire CFL. They are commuting every day to practice extensive different distances because they're in Guelph, Drink. They are constantly flying cross country, and it appears to be wearing on them, at least based on Kelly's comments. And, I've been critical of Kelly in the past, but there was a lot of people online who are saying, oh, what a crybaby. You got to play in whatever circumstances you're dealt. Like, Kelly's right here. The Argos have screwed over their players. by not giving them the opportunity to play at a temporary facility in Guelph or whatever it may have looked at, and to force them to play additional road games in places like Regina and Winnipeg, they have put their team at a disadvantage. And I do not blame any of these players if they are worn down and emotionally frustrated and just plain drained. And while I can't speak for what Coxie was feeling in that moment, if you're under additional strain and then something frustrating happens at the end of the game, maybe you just let loose. And I can somewhat understand that. Like, this Argos team is up against it right now.
Chad Kelly was being honest, and credit to him for his honesty, but his comments should be directed at his bosses, or whatever you want to call them, the owners at MLSE, because they did this to themselves. They thought, no, it's better for our team not only to play 3 extra road games, but arguably, I don't even know if it's an argument, to play those 3 road games in the hardest stadiums to play in the Canadian Football League. Winnipeg, Saskatchewan, and Hamilton. They're arch rivals. They're going to have a home game, a quote, home game at Hamilton Stadium. How ridiculous is that? So Chad Kelly's comments were brutally honest. But the Argonauts, you can't feel sorry for them because they did this to themselves with a sorry bleep excuse or excuses from Keith Pelly about how it went down, in a major lack of transparency. It's very clear that this was financial related in terms of the Argos being able to play these games at different stadiums, not having to foot the bill for having a temporary stadium. So again, credit to Amar Doman for setting up a spectacular facility and all the people who put the efforts into the Apple Bowl to have it look that way as well, not just Mr. Doman, but for the BC Lions as an organization for doing that, because that was unbelievable. Just look at what can happen when you put some effort and, yes, a few dollars and cents into it. But I get it. A lot of decisions in this world for a long time, and for a long time when we're out of it, fellas, will be made for financial reasons. But the Argos have nowhere to look at, I guess, other than the upper management above them that made those decisions. And it is difficult, and it is frustrating, because now you're playing only 6 home games and 12 road games. Like, you don't feel like you can do a lot of the things that Chad Kelly described, right? You don't get in a rhythm where you're used to at least having 9 home games. It's difficult. So again, full credit to Jake Mayer before and Chad Kelly for being honest. And I think when you do that, it endears you to the fans.
I will add one quick note, because this topic combined with Damonte Coxie reminded me of the comments that Damonte Coxie made to 3DownNation in, it was either late March or early April, regarding the extra away games. And he said, quote, "I'm ready. I love away games. I like being on the road, go to somebody else's house and chill in their backyard, get on their grill. I like going to people's cribs because people are defensive about their backyard. So let's get over here and be disrespectful and kick some stuff around, make them mad, ruffle some feathers up," close quote. It's one of the best quotes we've ever printed, by the way. Maybe that's just what he was doing. Leaving the field, he's like, yeah, I'm messing up. He literally got in his grill. He was messing up the grill, and he was purposely making everybody mad. And hey, if that was his goal, he succeeded. It hurt his team with the 25-yard penalty, but he succeeded.
The Saskatchewan Roughriders are on their second bye week at 4-1, but the team has arguably not fixed a problem that's plagued them since last season. Kicker. Alex Hale missed a 35-yard attempt against Hamilton in Week 6, as well as a convert. He is now 10 of 13 kicking field goals this season, just 76.9%. Brett Lawler was cut in the offseason after making 72.2% of his field goals last year, though he's ironically gone a perfect 14 for 14 in Ottawa this year. Do the Roughriders need a new kicker?
No, not yet. Hale is still in his rookie season, and as much as Lorne, who called into the Rider Broadcast Network 620 CKRM post-game show, wanted to tie a can to him and run him out of the province. I don't think we're quite there yet, okay? He hasn't even had manure dumped on his front yard.
What's the can
That's
for?
some old school thing. I have no idea. It's like when they used to get married, right? And used to tie cans to the car. I guess to let everybody know that a married couple was going through the town. Well, he's saying tie a can to him so that everybody knows that he's leaving town, right? You have to leave with the humiliation, I suppose.
I see.
But I think we're getting ahead of ourselves here. Okay, on the season, 10 of 13. Is that great? No, it's a little bit below 77% in terms of the percentage rate. Brett Lauther was worse last year, but he did have to deal with a back issue for really the entire season that he didn't talk about too much until after the year. And he has gone perfect in the nation's capital. So perhaps the answer was there all along. Just let Brett Lauther ride it out. Some fans in Ottawa wished the Redblacks let Lewis Ward ride it out. But hey, we're in professional football. I think what's going to happen here is Alex Hale's going to have the opportunity to keep kicking because he's a global. He allows the Riders to have another designated American on the roster, which is seen by many in the scouting community and coaching staffs as well as a decided advantage. So what might happen here is perhaps there's another global kicker brought in for some competition. Some people have thrown some names out there. If Rene Paredes comes back, I don't want to mess up the guy's name in Calgary, but perhaps he becomes available. I don't think teams are necessarily just going to trade kickers willy-nilly if they think they're good, but that is, to me, where I potentially see this going, unless the Riders feel like it has become too much to their detriment and they want to have a different roster construction. But that would mean having a different, kicker. Perhaps it's Jonathan Kim, who is an American who kicked really well and who a lot of people thought was going to win the job coming out of training camp. That said, Corey Mace, I thought, described it decently well, that kicking toward pill country can be an adventure, and that's the way that Hale missed the 35-yard field goal and 32-yard extra point, but it's professional ball. You got to put the ball through the uprights, or especially in Saskatchewan, they're going to be wanting to run you out of the province after 5 games when your team is 4-1. Like, that's what it's like to play in the fishbowl in Saskatchewan. You want the attention? You want to be a pro athlete? Here you go, Alex Hale. People want to run you out of town after 5 games. It doesn't seem like it's affected him, but let's see what happens in the future.
Do the Rough Riders need a new kicker? My answer is Hale, yes, they do. This is a very talented football team. They're good offensively. They're good defensively. They've got 2 really good returners, though unfortunately it appears both of them are hurt right now. This was the same issue they had last year. This is like a Ferrari, only instead of having a comfortable seat, you're sitting on like a worn out lazy boy. Like the car has to all match. And this is a sore spot that was held over from last season. Like Lewis Ward could be signed tomorrow. Why is Lewis Ward not here? And I appreciate what Corey May said. And look, I've never kicked a ball at Mosaic Stadium at either of the uprights, but if your answer is essentially, well, half the uprights at our stadium are hard to kick at, it's like, well, that's maybe more of an argument that you need a really great kicker, like someone who's an expert who can really do this. Like, kicking almost cost the Riders the Grey Cup. If Shea Patterson does not fumble at the goal line and the Alouettes make the 2-point convert, that's a tie game. Whereas Brett Lauther moments before had a chance to kick a very makeable field goal to make it an 11-point lead and missed. So the Riders, credit to them, great team, reigning Grey Cup champions. There's lots going on that's good, but you need to try to get as good as you can possibly get at every position. I don't believe they're as good as they could theoretically be at kicker.
I totally agree with you, Hodge, and I'm not in alignment with the soft-hearted Justin Dunk, who wants to give everyone the opportunity to get better. Alex Hale hasn't earned that opportunity, and it's not just that he's missed kicks.
It hasn't been that bad. Like, it's not horrible.
I mean, he's missed
35 yards was
chip
just wide, right? Like, just wide, right?
Yards.
That's a chip shot, man. Like, that can't happen at the professional level. And most of the ones he's missed have been chip shots. And he's missed converts, and he's missed short kicks. Like, to me, people take it for granted because it's advantageous that that global kickers should be a thing. Like, there's not that many good global kickers. There's a lot of great global punters. Global kickers are hard to come by. And right now, the Riders have gambled, and I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze. Like, they're going to lose a football game because of missed field goals. And right now, the advantage that they're getting is what? That they can dress David Benda on special teams, and he's been fantastic on teams. For the record, he's got 5 special teams tackles thus far. But they cut Tyron Vrede, who's a global linebacker who can play special teams. And by the way, he signed in Edmonton and had 2 special teams tackles in his very first game within 2 days of being signed. So how much of an advantage are you really getting by playing Benda as your special teamer as an American when you could have instead a reliable kicker that could hit from distance and wouldn't miss chip shots? To me, it's a no-brainer. This has to change. Yes, there will be a potential consequence on special teams, but to me, if you're making more kicks, that's going to be worthwhile.
Alex Hale has attempted 2 field goals from 40 yards or more, and he has missed both of them. That is shocking. Hashtag justice for Jonathan Kim.
Yes. Poor Jonathan Kim looked great in training camp in the preseason.
He looked so good in preseason.
Oh, man. Poor guy.
Maybe he'll get a shot, fellas. Maybe there's a chance. Canadian receiver Tyson Philpot is off to the best start to a season by any receiver of any designation in Canadian Football League history. A statistician confirmed to you, Hodge. Do you think he could realistically break the CFL's single season receiving yardage record?
I don't think I'd put money on it because 18 games is a lot, but it can't be understated how good he's been to start the year. Through 4 games, he made 36 catches for 587 yards and 3 touchdowns. He just had another 100-yard game with a touchdown in week 6. The previous high through 4 games belonged to Adarius Bowman in 2016, who caught 34 passes for 543 yards with the then Edmonton Eskimos. So to me, this is an unbelievable start. And for context, going into week 6, so not including week 6, Philpot only needed to average 103.5 receiving yards per game for the rest of the season to catch the all-time record, which belongs to Alan Pitts. He set it in 1994 with the Calgary Stampeders. He put up 2,036 yards. Now, Doug Flutie was his quarterback, so I think that needs to be stated. But still, obviously, an amazing season from Alan Pitts. And yeah, Philpot, by averaging a little over 100 yards a game, can get there. Now, there have been 2 2,000-yard seasons in CFL history. The other belongs to, 2 more. They belong to Terry Greer and Daryl Mitchell, respectively. That occurred in 1983 and 1998, both of the Toronto Argonauts. Obviously, if you can catch Mitchell at exactly 2,000 yards, I like your chances of catching Alan Pitts at 2,036. I want to quickly, and I know we're up against the clock a little bit here, boys, but I want to highlight a couple of other guys quickly. Hal Patterson owned this record forever. He put up 1,914 yards in 1956. The reason I highlight it is because that season, the CFL only had 14 games. So he put up 136.7 yards per game and was named the CFL's most outstanding player. One of the best seasons by any player in any professional league, I think regardless of sport. 1,914 yards in 14 games. Unbelievable. That said, leading into this week, Philpot was on pace for over 2,600. Do I think he's going to get there? No, he's going to cool off at some point. But I think 2,000 yards, honestly, is realistic, particularly if he stays healthy. The record I think he has a great chance to break, boys, however, is the one from 1967 when Terry Evanshin caught 96 passes for 1,662 yards over 16 games with the Stampeders. That is the record for a Canadian player in the CFL for a single season. For context, Evanshin caught an average of 76.8 receiving yards per game that year. Well, Philpot's average is still over 120 through 5 games. So I love Philpot's chances of breaking the Canadian receiving record. Beyond that, I think there's a chance, but there's a reason there's only been 3 2,000-yard receiving seasons in CFL history. That's because it's an extraordinarily hard thing to do.
Honestly, the biggest factor in whether or not Tyson Philpot can do this is going to be health, both his and that of his quarterback, because we've seen hot starts from Philpot before. We've seen fantastic stretches, but he has only ever played one full 18-game season, and that was his rookie year, right? Injuries have been a problem for him. Injuries have been a problem for his brother. In fact, I would argue durability concerns are one of the major reasons why he hasn't received an NFL opportunity, or didn't, coming out of the University of Calgary. And it was why some were skeptical of him, because he is a slider framed receiver. If he can stay healthy, I think he can continue to put up some eye popping numbers, and he's got himself in a really good position. He also needs Davis Alexander to stay healthy, though, because Alexander has been playing unreal at the quarterback position. He puts him in a position to succeed. Philpot said last week that when Alexander's on the field, he knows the ball will be exactly where it needs to be. He's not worried about getting smoked. He knows that he can always make a play on it. That's a great position to be in if you're a receiver. And if Alexander goes down for whatever reason, the drop off from him to Dustin Crum, as much as I've been, high on Dustin Crum after some of his wins with the Redblacks, it's substantial. So he needs to stay healthy himself and keep his quarterback on the field. And if he does that, I think anything is possible.
There's been so many on pace for projections to start the 2026 CFL season, but to me, this is the most real one, arguably alongside Justin Rankin becoming potentially the first player to go 1,000 rushing and 1,000 receiving. Tyson Philpot has been unbelievable, and you guys are right, Davis Alexander likely needs to stay healthy, but I think he can keep this pace up if he stays healthy. He's that good, and yet again, it needs to be driven home that this dude is Canadians. And it wasn't that long ago that Canadians at skill position players, weren't even being selected that high in the CFL draft. Like, you guys remember when the Philpots were coming out and you heard the talk of them potentially being first rounders? It was hard to believe just because personnel evaluators weren't talking about players like that at this skill positions as Canadians unless they were unique or coming out of the NCAA. Both these guys start at the University of Calgary, were obviously stars in British Columbia coming up through the ranks. And Tyson Philpot in particular is absolutely balling. He is worth the price of admission.
JC, I know you got to run. How about you do your neg lister, and then Duncan and I will come back for the final set.
Sounds good. My random neg lister this week is going back to the receiving corps in Saskatchewan, because I talked about Cornell Powell 2 weeks ago. Well, they dropped him off the neg list. Wasn't a great analysis by me, I guess. But they replaced him with a receiver that I like even better. Nick Nash out of San Jose State. Boy, oh boy, this could be an exciting project in the CFL. He is currently with the Washington Commanders after spending most of 2025 on the practice roster with the Atlanta Falcons as an undrafted free agent. But when he was with the Spartans in his final year with that program, he won the NCAA receiving Triple Crown. That means he led the entire country in receptions with 103, in receiving yards with 1,382, and in receiving touchdowns with 16. This guy should have won the Bolitnikoff Award as the top receiver in the country, but lost out to Travis Hunter, who was only a part-time receiver, but ultimately won the Heisman Trophy this year. He's not the fastest receiver. He only ran a 4.57, but he's got a decent-sized body, 6'2.5", 203. He goes undrafted because he lacks that top-end speed, but there's a reason why he's also unpolished as a receiver. It's because he's actually a converted quarterback. This guy was a dual-threat passer who came in to San Jose State for that purpose, has actually made 6 starts at QB for San Jose State, went 3-3 before converting to a receiver in his last 2 years. Given how productive he was, particularly in that senior season, and how competitive he is, I think he could be a really interesting addition if he makes his way to the CFL someday soon.
Awesome. In some U Sports news, this is a big story. The University of Alberta Golden Bears have announced the commitment of quarterback Christian Veilleux, and that is how Veilleux pronounces his name, who went unselected in the 2026 CFL draft. The Ottawa native was a highly touted recruit to Penn State and later spent time as a starter with Pittsburgh and Georgia State, though he was benched at each stop. How big of an ad is this for the University of Alberta?
It's a story, Hodge, broken first by 3DownNation.com. And this is a big deal for Veilleux to land in U Sports, specifically because, Hodge, apparently he has 3 years left of eligibility to play Canadian university football. And we're talking about a guy that was part of the Elite 11, which are essentially up-and-coming quarterbacks that get selected to go to a highly skilled camp on their way up in the recruiting process when they're in high school, and also a guy that became the first quarterback of Canadian descent to appear in a Power 5 game since Jesse Palmer in the year 2000. So we're talking about a guy who was once viewed as an elite prospect who started his NCAA career at Penn State University, and in that game in 2021, completed 15 of 24 passes for 235 yards and 3 touchdowns with no interceptions in a 28-0 win over Rutgers. Now, he did bounce around. He went from Penn State to Pittsburgh to Georgia State, where he had been the last 2 years. But there has been talent in varying glimpses of it. Hodge, you and JC saw him live at the CFL Combine. He ultimately went unselected in the CFL Draft, which made it almost a surprise to me when I heard about him potentially playing in U Sports. I thought, his career's probably over, but he gets a chance to jumpstart it. So what do you think he needs to do, again, from seeing him live in person at the CFL Combine in Edmonton in March, to work his way into legitimate prospect territory where perhaps down the line, if he plays well with the Golden Bears, CFL teams might give him an opportunity?
Veilleux's got really nice size. He's got a live arm. He has good athleticism, like not a ton of rushing production, but very mobile in the pocket. He has kind of that pocket elusiveness that you look for even in pocket passers. His challenge was accuracy. It was a really big challenge at times during his collegiate career, and that was the challenge at Combine. When I spoke to talent evaluators after the fact and asked about Veilleux, the message that I repeatedly heard was, yeah, we were kind of excited to see if, for whatever reason, he was able to show some of that accuracy we didn't always see on film in person in Edmonton. That did not happen, and that's why he did not get picked. So I think it's a great fit for the Alberta Golden Bears, a team that is looking to kind of break through in the Canada West standings. And I think it's a great fit for him too. I mean, first of all, U of A is just a really good school. So assuming he's also legitimately attending classes and pursuing some academics, there's some good off-field stuff there. But I also think he's a great potential candidate to lead that team to new heights. And I think, as you said, Justin, potentially still eventually go down the professional route if that's what he wants to do. It's time for Hodge's Heritage Moment, and we're staying in Edmonton for this one. On this day in 2013, Kavis Reed spoke emotionally to the media following a 17-3 loss to the BC Lions. There has to be consequences now, Reed said, appearing frustrated by his team's lack of discipline. Enough talking about it. There has to be consequences. It's not acceptable. We're not good enough to be as undisciplined as we are at home, he said. The comments have since become something of a meme on social media, often being accompanied by the hashtag consequences. And I know this is 13 years old. First of all, I can't believe it's been 13 years since this happened. But every now and again, I still see a reference to consequences.
What were the actual consequences, though? Because he's the man who could have handed them down.
It's a good question. And I honestly, talking about this reminds me a little bit of Ryan Dinwiddie making empty threats to the Toronto Argonauts last year and then kind of doing the same to Ottawa. Like, I don't know. If early in the season you're openly talking about needing consequences and then you're not sure what's coming. It's not a good place to be.
Hashtag consequences. It is
Consequence.
funny. You kind of alluded to it, but when people bring that up to me, it's like, what was it about? You think of some of these all-time memorable rants, like a lot of them don't really make sense.
I mean, it's been a long time, but in that particular game, I think Edmonton had taken a number of penalties, but they also lost by 14 points and they didn't score a touchdown. Like how maybe the discipline was bad, but you're not going to win a CFL game scoring 3 points. So I don't know what was going through Coach Reid's mind at this point.
Consequences. Let's get to the 3-minute drill. The Toronto Argonauts have released Canadian offensive lineman Anim Dankwa. Was that a surprise?
It is. He was a tackle project, started one game last year, looked pretty good. He's massive, right? You can't teach size, 6'8", 355. I think he'll get signed somewhere else. Longtime Saskatchewan Roughriders quarterback Bob Tachek, and I'm told that's how it's said. It is spelled P-T-A-C-E-K, died at the age of 89. What is the most notable part of his career? Do you know about the interleague trade, Justin?
Yes, sir. A rare CFL to NFL. Yes, it happened, folks. Trade. Unbelievable to think about it. Way back when in the 1960s. Charleston Hughes has been selected for induction into the Canadian Football Hall of Fame. Worthy pick, right?
Absolutely. He's number 5th all-time in sacks and obviously was a star on the field for a couple of different teams. So excited to see him get the nod. The Ottawa Redblacks acquired global punter James Burnett from the Ottawa Redblacks for a conditional 8th-round CFL draft pick. What does that tell you?
It tells me perhaps there's an injury. I was going to say in the 6th, but they've been practicing at the University of G. I won't say the name so people don't drink. There's likely an injury there. That's why he's been brought in. The BC Lions have hired Dennis McKnight as their special teams coordinator. Is that a smart move?
Look, McKnight came into Hamilton in very similar circumstances 2 years ago after they fired their special teams coordinator and the units got way better. So I think it's a great hire for them. I really do. Mike O'Shea said that Canadian rookie Taylor Elgersma didn't require any, quote, massaging, unquote, after his decision to start Dru Brown in week 6. Do you believe that?
I do. The way O'Shea spoke about this as well, Hodge, and you know O'Shea very well, you get the sense that Taylor Elgersma has shown O'Shea and everybody else in the building that he's a true pro. So he understands that hard decisions are going to be made, and I think he's going to keep his nose to the grindstone and try to become a franchise guy potentially down the line in Winnipeg, or if it ever happens, and it would be down the road, somewhere else in the CFL. Rogers is completing its takeover of MLSE, purchasing the outstanding 25% stake from Laird Tannenbaum for $4.35 billion. What does that mean? Possibly for the Argonauts.
Well, I've seen some early speculation that Rogers, who already previously owned the Blue Jays separately, could put like the Raptors, Leafs, and Blue Jays into kind of a new corporate entity and possibly look to divest of the smaller teams, of which the Argonauts would be part. But of course, it's early. That's speculation. And if the Argo's up for sale, I'm very curious to see who might potentially buy them. The Calgary Stampeders released Canadian cornerback Delaney Robinson after he started 2 games for them in place of Adrian Green. Does that make sense?
I don't think so, because what if Green gets hurt, or there's the fact that I think Robinson continues to develop. I don't think he played so bad in those games that he had to be released. I think this is a guy that has some talent. Hopefully he resurfaces in the CFL and shows it. The Hamilton Tiger-Cats inked receiver Keandre Smith to a contract extension that makes him the franchise's highest paid Canadian in the salary cap era at $272,500 in hard money for the 2027 CFL season. Is that money well-deserved for Smith?
I think it is. I talked earlier in the show about how I thought he played really poorly in week 6, but he's still a fantastic player. He's off to a great start to the season. And I think the Ticats are smart to get this done now, just looking at the amount of money some of these Canadian receivers are making in free agency. Smith could have gotten even more, I think, if he went to market. Smart for Steeltown to get it done. The Montreal Alouettes signed Terry Wilson, who left the Blue Bombers in training camp. Are you surprised to see him back in the league?
I'm not. I think it makes sense. And if he could continue his development and become better as a legitimate pocket passer in the CFL, that perhaps there's a longer future there. But he's intriguing and athletic. And if the Alouettes are bringing him in, there must be something to it. Alouettes quarterback Davis Alexander was seen grabbing his left hamstring late in week 6, but said he was fine after the game, which was a win over Calgary. Do you believe him?
Look, I think Davis Alexander is maybe the most exciting player in the CFL. He might be the closest thing we've seen to Doug Flutie since Doug Flutie. I'm exceptionally high on him. But when literally every game at some point he grabs his hamstring, you have to be concerned about that. Like, I appreciate he says it's fine, but it is extremely atypical to virtually every game suddenly pull up and grab your hamstring. If I was an Alouettes fan, I'd be a little worried about that. Last one, the Toronto Argonauts have added former second-round NFL draft pick Denzel Mims to their negotiation list. Do you think he'd be a valuable addition?
Potentially, even just from a speed standpoint, Hodge. This guy at the NFL Combine, when he was coming out, ran 4.38. That's a laser time, too. That is fast, man. He could add a vertical threat if he ever ends up with the Argos.
For Justin Dunk and JC Abbott, I'm John Hodge. We thank you as always for listening to the 3DownNation podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter, free insight, news, and analysis in your inbox every single day so you don't miss a beat about the Canadian Football League, U Sports, and so much more. We'll see you on Wednesday, JC and I, for our picks for week number 7 in the CFL. Already week 7, Dunk. We're like a third of the way there. That is crazy to me the way time flies. We'll see you then.